So I want to talk about you now, and I'm excited to talk to you about you and not the news.
Okay.
So I had a few questions for you. Cornel West speaks very, very highly of you,
Yes.
and one of the things that he said about you was that you are one of the people who you kept your integrity, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said you kept your integrity through the Obama years. What did he mean by that? And what does that mean to you?
Well, he's very generous, man. And he gave me a blurb for my book, which is great. But what he was referring to was this exhortation to not just to vote blue no matter who, not just to support the Democrats and shut up about it, but Obama, first Black president. Don't you want the Republicans out? You can't question him. Look at the right wing. They're already always attacking him. You can't say anything. Obamacare. If you even asked the question, you wouldn't have Obamacare and a plan that, lets you buy insurance that's too expensive. So people were supposed to shut up when he destroyed Libya or bailed out the banks, or did any of the other things that we're just talking about that Democrats and Republicans can agree on. So I appreciate his praise of me, but it still happens. It's like a cult of, Michelle Obama had a podcast and people are still talking. And I was like, oh my God, will this ever end? But it won't. He's too useful. Bush is, as we may recall, was unpopular, and the rulers they had to have a Democrat in office, and they had to have somebody who could market himself as a change agent without really changing anything, while still doing all the things that they want a president and the Congress to do. So it was tough, and I'm sure you've experienced it too. To criticize Obama, to even ask a question about him is forbidden still. But I can't do anything else. I couldn't change my religion, so to speak, because he was president. And that's one of the things we're very proud of at Black Agenda Report.
So in your book, which I have not read yet, I need to read it, Prejudential, you explore, the history of the presidents and how they relate to Black America. And one of the questions you pose, some of the presidents that are deemed by society more sympathetic to Black America, the examples you gave was Bill Clinton and Abraham Lincoln. You asked the question, well, were they actually? So what's some of the stuff that you found when you wrote that book?
Talk about propaganda. I found that Abraham Lincoln was not the great emancipator. His major goal was to literally try to send Black people out of the country. The Democrats until the 60s were the party of the segregated South. So FDR, when he was ever asked to do anything to fight discrimination, to fight Jim Crow, would always say, well, I would love to help you, but I need those votes from Southerners. That Bill Clinton was one of the most conservative presidents, the Sister Souljah moment. He tried it again at John Lewis's funeral, talking about Stokely Carmichael, which who the hell knew where that came from? The guy who he filled the prisons, who had a campaign event outside a prison in Georgia, putting Black men on display in prison garb. The man who gave us all this media consolidation. That's one of the reasons that we have this crappy cable service. There are only a handful of companies in the communications. There's 6 countries. Anything you see or hear in this country, you get from one of 6 countries. There used to be hundreds of radio stations. There were rules that you couldn't have a newspaper and TV station in the same city. He got rid of that.
Yes, he did. Telecommunications Act in 1996.
Right. And the discourse has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And that is why certain voices can't be heard. So Clinton was terrible. I'm embarrassed to admit that I voted for him both times, but I've long been over that. I don't vote for Democrats anymore in presidential elections. In fact, I'm a Green Party member. So, and Obama, he talk about a cynic. He knew that Black people, this idea of having a Black president was so powerful, he could get away with anything. And still scolding Black people, talking over our heads straight to white people, to talk about Black men not being responsible, or jokes about Cousin Pookie and Cousin Ray Ray. And if a Democrat loses, it's because of some Black man Cousin Pookie won't get off the couch. Another more bailouts of Wall Street, taking Bush's temporary, in quotes, tax cuts for the rich and making them permanent. So there aren't any presidents, frankly, who were friends of Black people. Those who did the right thing did so because they were pressured by mass movements, because the people forced them to do the right thing. And it says something larger about the kind of country we have and who's really in power, and who gets what they want in this country. We've touched on it many times in this conversation. So it's the people who need to have power over our lives, and we need a real people's party, a real workers' party, a real environmental party, a real peace party. That's what we have to have. And it's not the Democrats, and you can't allow ourselves to be frightened into supporting people who stab us in the back time and time again.
So where do you go? And this actually transitions really nice, but this was one of the questions I wrote down that I really wanted to ask you. Where do you find hope these days? Like actual hope, how do you maintain an amount of optimism? If you do?
Well, conversely, I'm not rejoicing in anybody's suffering, but I am optimistic that it's clear that the system is coming apart, that the COVID pandemic has exposed that we don't have a real healthcare system. We don't have a political system that takes care of people's needs. We have a system that is built to create wars all over the world. The killing of George Floyd, I think the protests were so big, were all over the country, were so diverse. I mean, Portland doesn't even have any Black people, has very few Black people, and yet they have these huge demonstrations. People are angry about a lot of things, and that's something to be optimistic about. It's not something to try to diminish. It's not something to try to discourage. We get the most in this country when the people make coherent demands. We're still working through this in this new movement, but that actually gives me optimism that the system has lost legitimacy. That is a good thing. People talk about the American empire falling like that's a bad thing. No, that's a good thing. And It's a good thing that there's no legitimacy. But if there is not an active left, then you have a problem. And then you really have fascism, and not just an obnoxious man who tweets a lot. True fascism.
Do you think we need a general strike?
Yes, but we need people who are educated about such a thing, to know that there is such a thing as a general strike, to know that that is a possibility. And we're so propagandized about electoral politics, and you always see it in an election year. The only thing we're encouraged to do is vote. So just vote blue, just vote for Biden. Like he's going to take care of things that were problems before Trump became president. So we have to undo the propaganda, undo the miseducation that we've been under, and then we can do things like have a general strike and not feel obliged to vote for people whose interests are not ours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People don't realize it's like no. Trump didn't cause all of this stuff to crumble. It was crumbling, and that's why we got Trump, and now it's continuing to crumble.
Yep. There's no legitimacy. We shouldn't try to give it any legitimacy. Let's call it what it is. Stop saying we live in a democracy. Stop saying we live in an advanced society where kids can't go to school, but corporations decide whether they can learn or not. No, they can't stop putting lipstick on the pig. And that actually does give me some optimism.
I'm with you. Hey, and I can give you one more. I don't even call us a country. I say we are a corporation with state lines.
Pretty much, yes. And that's why there's no cohesion in this country. And that's why there are people who don't want to wear a face mask, because people don't feel any concern for anybody else because of this dog-eat-dog society that we live in. That creates a lot of craziness, quite frankly.
Yeah, I am with you. I'm with you 100%. So where can people go to learn more about you?
Twitter, Freedom Ride blog, my columns in blackagendareport.com every week, patreon.com/Margaret Kimberley, my book, Prejudential, you can get on Amazon. If you have Amazon issues, and that's fine, you can get it straight from the publisher, Steerforth Press. That's steerforth.com.
Thank you so much, Margaret. It was awesome to talk to you. I've been wanting to have you for a long time. Thanks so much for being here. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your news on with Ron.